Welcome to the Singer's Guide podcast with me, Tessa. This is the show for ambitious singers who want more than just scales and song practice. We'll talk about the things regular singing lessons don't always have time to cover. Because being a singer is about more than just your voice. It's about confidence, preparation, and all the little skills that make performing effortless. I'm excited to be your guide and your fellow traveller as we explore them all. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Singer's Guide podcast. I'm your host, Tessa, and I'm going to be honest, this episode is not the episode I intended to record today. I was going to talk about something else, but I just felt really unmotivated. I don't know whether it's because of the time of year. It is currently late November 2025 in the north of England where I am. It's dark when you leave the house. It's dark before you get home. It feels like it's been raining for weeks and the weather has turned. It's really cold. Maybe that's got something to do with it, but I decided instead of doing my planned episode, I was going to talk about motivation and specifically motivation for practice. So I have less of a plan for this episode than maybe previous episodes, but we're going to just talk about it and see what comes out. I think it's quite common for us to have peaks and troughs in our motivation, especially when it comes to singing practice. And so we're going to talk about a couple of different types of motivation and how we can use that knowledge to kind of, hack our own brains and make sure that we do practice even if it feels like our motivation is somewhat lacking. So the first thing I want to say, just to kind of reassure folk, is that if you don't have motivation to practice in a specific way or practice a specific song, it's not because you're lazy or because you are deficient in some way. It happens to everybody, and we all have things that we would prefer to do and not prefer to do. So I don't want anybody to be shaming themselves or feeling guilty about a lack of motivation. That's not going to help anyone achieve anything. What we're going to do is try and think of ways to increase motivation. So we're going to talk about two main types of motivation. We've got internal motivation and we've got external motivation. Internal motivation, also called intrinsic motivation, is when you feel like you really want to do something because you find it interesting or enjoyable or it makes you feel good. It's driven by you as an individual, your passions, your interests, curiosity, or the desire to feel accomplished. External motivation is where the motivation comes from an external source. Maybe you're going to get rewarded, maybe you're going to get paid, maybe you're going to get a good grade or a new job. It could also be that you have a time pressure as a motivator. So you have a deadline or you've got a gig. That's the thing that motivates you. We can have positive types and negative types. It's like the carrot or the stick. Are we motivating with the carrot? So that would be the reward if it was an external, or internal, I'm going to feel really good about this. Or are we motivating with the stick? If I don't do this, then I'm going to feel really bad about myself, or I am going to be punished in some way. I really don't like that kind of motivation. And I think that using that negative motivation undermines a lot of what we want from ourselves as singers to be able to motivate ourselves internally. Because that's the goal, right? We want to have our motivation be an internal, intrinsic motivation. We want to get better at singing for the sake of feeling good about ourselves, feeling confident, and seeing ourselves improve and develop a skill. What I want from an external motivator is to help build my internal motivation, not make me terrified. And I think a lot of us have those examples, those stories of being told off by a music teacher for not practicing enough, being scared into practicing more. So let's talk external motivators. There's positive external motivators like I want to get good grades, I want to get better gigs, I want to get really good at connecting with an audience to build a fan base, to improve my income streams. I much prefer that as a driver than a negative style motivator. If I don't practice, then I'm going to get told off by my teacher, or I'm going to lose the gig, or I'm going to embarrass myself on the gig. That might be a strong motivator for some, but it's not going to help build our intrinsic, our internal motivation. If you are struggling to make yourself learn something, having a deadline is a really great motivator. You could book a gig. You could sign up to an open mic night. You could book a session in a studio. All of these things are going to create an external motivation to get yourself practicing because you're going to do something that you can't get out of. Obviously, some of those things cost money, but we can also create those deadlines for ourselves. Maybe you have a friend who's also a musician and you have like an accountability buddy situation where you make a plan to send each other a video once a week and you don't let each other back out of that. And you make a pact that you are gonna make sure each other hits the deadline. Setting those deadlines for yourselves might be enough without an accountability friend, but I do find that often it's much easier to let things slide if you haven't told somebody about them. Take this podcast, for example. If I hadn't made it public and said that I was sharing it every 2 weeks, maybe I would be more inclined to just sit back and not record when I wasn't feeling great. But the simple fact that I put it out there, I tell the world, the universe, social media that I'm making a podcast, it keeps me accountable and it keeps me motivated in an external way. So, deadlines and accountability can make a really big difference. We can also use rewards. If your brain is so inclined, you could tell yourself that as soon as you have managed to nail that little phrase that you're supposed to be working on in your song, then you get to have a snack or give yourself 5 minutes scroll time on your phone or sing the song that you actually want to sing, but is not the song that you're working on. So setting up little kind of bargaining chips for yourself. I will let myself sing that new song that I really want to sing once I've nailed this tricky part of the song that my teacher wants me to work on or that I need to work on for a specific reason. So we've got deadlines and we've got rewards. There's 2 easy external things that we can rely on when our intrinsic or internal motivation is somewhat lacking. And relying on external motivators when we need to can increase your internal motivation too, because you're still working on your singing, you're still seeing yourself get better, and because of that, because you are still practicing, you're still developing the skills that you want to work on as a singer, you're going to reap the benefit of that, and that in turn might then increase your internal motivation, your sense of personal satisfaction, and therefore make you want to practice more, and you maybe don't need to rely so heavily on those external motivators. There are a few things that can help us to increase internal motivation. They may kind of depend on the way that your brain works and what your personal preferences are. So maybe novelty is a big motivator for you. If something is new and shiny, that might increase your internal motivation. And this is where we can like cross the lines a little bit, right? So for example, you can buy, like little vocal trainers or vocal straws. And having that shiny new thing creates a novelty, which then increases your motivation to practice. Is that an external motivator or an internal motivator? I think it's kind of both. Like it's an external thing, but it's increasing your internal motivation because you are more motivated to practice because you've got this new thing. maybe curiosity is your driver. And so you pick something where you really have to think and engage some like critical thinking or like problem solving skills in order to get it right. So for example, a transcription where you've taken something with lots of really tricky riffs, or maybe it's a jazz improvisation and you're writing it out or learning it by ear even. That is like a little puzzle that you need to solve. Maybe that's the thing that's going to increase your motivation. A little aside, I've seen Jacob Collier talk about this in a Q&A. He was once asked how he motivated himself to practice all of the different instruments that he plays. If you don't know Jacob Collier, he's a phenomenal multi-instrumentalist who's got countless Grammys by now. But he said, much to, I think, people's surprise, that he never really practiced. What he did do was try and solve puzzles, and he followed his curiosity. And in doing so, he learned a lot of skills. And I think it's important to state, like, that was practice, what he was doing, but he wasn't thinking it in that way. He was thinking it more as a puzzle. There's internal motivation for you. And internal motivation will also be improved just by getting better at the skill, noticing that you are getting better at the skill, because that will increase your motivation. How many times can I say motivation today? It'll increase your motivation to practice more. So by documenting, that's also going to help. By writing down and journaling, how did it feel? Having a practice diary or a practice journal. How did it feel? So you can go back to 2, 3, 4 weeks ago and watch a recording or listen to a recording of you singing that same thing and notice how much you have improved. Oftentimes with singing, it feels like we haven't improved because the improvements are quite small. And so you don't see that until you go back in time. So having a way of reminding yourself of how far you've come, having an example of your improvement in these skills that we're learning, these complex skills, can be really motivating. So if you don't already, maybe I would suggest filming yourself on a regular basis or keeping a practice journal of when you do practice. The final thing I'd like to say on motivation and practice is that sometimes it's okay not to do the heavy, intense practice that you feel like you should do, and either take a break or do some sort of practice that is more enjoyable. Things like singing in a choir or playing in a band with your friends. These are still valid practices, but they are much easier to motivate yourself to do. And that's because we get the energy and the community and connection with other people. You can also legitimately not practice and not do anything, especially if you're working on a new skill and you are building a new neural pathway, for example, for a specific type of vocal technique. Your brain actually needs a rest because that's when it's going to process. So sometimes taking a couple of days off can be really beneficial, and you'll find that you come back and things are easier. I am a big advocate for singers knowing that there are a number of different ways to practice that aren't singing. If you've heard me talk on this podcast before, you will know that there are voiceless practice options that don't involve any singing. Listening to new music or watching singers can be a form of practice. Practice is just a way of improving your skills as a singer, but there are a lot of skills and things that we need to know as singers. We need to find new repertoire, we need to learn lyrics, we need to get confident standing in front of a group of people and performing. All of these things can be practiced, and they can be practiced in different ways, and that is one of the things that the Singers Practice Hub does really well, is that it gives you different options for different elements of being a singer. So you are more likely to feel motivated because you've got choices. You can do technique things, but you can also learn a song study that will help you but might feel novel. You can do a singing snack that maybe is more curiosity based. Having a tool like the Singers Practice Hub can really help you to be motivated. There's also a community element which can keep you accountable. If you're more interested in the Singers Practice Hub, there are details in the show notes, or you can listen to episode 7 where I talk about it all. And I talk about why it happened and what it's got in it and all of those good things. So there you go. There is an episode talking about motivation. And I hope that has been helpful to you if you have been lacking in motivation, because it happens to us all. And sometimes even the podcast that you were planning to make just can't motivate you. So you change your plans, you find something more novel or that piques your curiosity more, and you go with that. You have to work with what you're given. The most important thing is to have self-compassion and a load of different tools that will support that self-compassion, so that you don't judge yourself, you don't feel shamed, but instead you have other options that can help you. And with that, I am going to sign off. But before I do, I'm going to ask you my question of season 1 once more, which is, what do you wish you had learned sooner? Maybe you wish you had learned how to practice sooner. Maybe you wish that you had learned to use more positive motivation than negative motivation, because that's much more beneficial to the way that your brain works. Whatever it is, pop them in the comments, and I'm going to talk about them in the final episodes of this season, and maybe they will even inspire their very own episode. So thank you again for listening. Please do check out the show notes for Quiet Practice Toolkit, which is a free resource for you, might help you with your motivation, and also the Singers Practice Hub, and I will see you next time. Happy singing! Thanks for tuning in to the Singer's Guide podcast. You'll find all the resources and links from this episode in the show notes. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with a fellow singer who'd love it too. And don't forget to connect with me on socials at Tessa Smith Music. Keep singing, keep practicing, and I'll see you next time.